Now, I have to tell you, when we were talking about this panel before, well, you have to work out who's who here, but someone said, I'll answer any question the audience is going to ask. Someone else says, I don't want to answer any questions. So we're going to dive in.
Great. Bring it on.
So let's start with you, Hazel. Your business, you had a really brilliant, exciting business called Museo, acquired by SoundCloud. You are now involved in what SoundCloud's doing in AI. Do you want to talk a bit about what's happening?
Absolutely, certainly am. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. My name's Hazel Savage. I'm the Vice President of Music Intelligence at SoundCloud. But up until a year ago, I was the CEO and co-founder of Museo, a Singapore-based company that did AI for the music industry. And SoundCloud were one of our biggest customers before they bought us, because they have one of the biggest catalogs in the world. They got 340 million tracks. And my company's really focused on how do we use AI to be able to understand the music that we already have, because usually volume is a bit of a challenge. So yeah, that's what I'm up to these days.
Thanks. Meng, you are the CEO and co-founder of BandLab. Would you mind just telling us a bit about what you're doing at BandLab as it concerns AI?
Yeah, sure. So on the BandLab side, we're obviously involved in many different parts of the chain, and obviously in the wider Caldecott Music Group, everything from musical instruments to media and brands like that. But when it comes to BandLab and the idea of empowering creators all around the world, that's one of the areas where AI is one of the most exciting things. So our vision at BandLab is a world in which there are no barriers for creation and sharing of music, and for people all around the world, especially in underprivileged areas, to have the access to making music on their phone. So we are one of the world's largest DAWs, and as a result of that, some of our AI creation tools are some of the most exciting things that have been growing, things like BandLab Song Starter, which is a generative AI tool for making music, but also something that we care a lot about because we're looking at empowering people and breaking down these barriers is also the ethical and the regulation around AI, because we believe that the people who are hurt the most, if not taken care of properly, are really the people at the bottom. And so this is an area where, we're both excited by what empowers and building things that empower people, but also at the same time being very, very conscious and thinking about what could happen next if it's not taken correctly.
Thanks. Alisha, you are running all the technology over at TuneCore, so I'm sure you've got a lot to think about when it comes to AI. Would you mind just telling everyone a bit about what you're doing?
Well, some artists think I just fixed the computers. Sometimes I do that.
Can you reset my password?
Right on it, last pass. But I'm Chief Technology and Product Officer at TuneCore. So I build the tools and services that enable us to help artists globally make better music, become better known, and make their lives easier. We do that via partnerships as well as our online portals.
Super. So staying with you, Alisha, as you think about AI in your business, to what extent do you think it's an enabler for what you're doing? And do you see any of the friction that I mentioned when we talk about legal uncertainty? Do you see that becoming an issue, or how is it working?
Well, I'll put the caveat that I've been working in Web 2 way before Web 3 came along with personalization recommendation at some of the top media and social platform companies that have changed their names in the world. And I know certainly that we have no control over all of this. We never would have predicted where the internet went 10 years ago and what the laws defined. But at TuneCore, because we enable and we leverage technology to essentially do what big labels do with people using tech to provide access to all of our artists, on our side, we leverage that technology to enable artists to break down the barriers that are preventing them from making money online. We're talking CDs to digital here, where there's more ways to make money leveraging technology. And then we also just want to provide to artists just a path for where to go from here. And we do that by just really publishing our 4 pillars of how to approach that and working with our partners to enable that path for artists, working with AI, which I could go deeper into, but I'll move on that. For when artists are working with AI and working with this new technology, they need a partner to be able to guide them along the way. So we published our 4 principles for how to enable that, because let's face it, artists aren't going to know all of how an algorithm works. But we enable them to be able to have these partnerships with DSPs to have consent over how their music, their voice, and their art is leveraged by these new technologies such as AI. Control, so that they can be able to say, all right, this is how I want it to be used, or at least be able to control how it is represented to the public when it's put out there. And compensation, where if their music is being leveraged by AI, they should be able to get paid in some way. That requires partnerships, and the partnerships that we enable with DSPs and the many tech companies. One good example is CreateSafe, where we worked with Grimes, the artist Grimes, and CreateSafe to enable her to license her voice out to artists in a form of AI for them to be able to publish music using TuneCore's platform and get a 50% royalty split. That was created from working with several DSPs to enable that relationship and leveraging splits features so that artists can actually do that split. You can say as much as you want, oh, give me a percentage of this, but if there isn't the technology available to do it within the tap of a button or a few taps of a button, you're not going to be able to get compensation for this AI stuff. And then finally, transparency. And transparency comes down to, and I can, as someone who worked in personalization, I know that machine learning doesn't have a track record for everything it's doing. But we do know where things are coming from, and we do know what the output is of it. Artists should be able to control how their work is leveraged by the output of what machine learning and what AI learns and creates from it. And then the representation of that content out in the world should be able to be, they should have some sense of it shouldn't be communicated as something that replaces, essentially. We believe at TuneCore and believe that ultimately AI is a gate, it opens gates, it removes barriers, and it enables and augments human creativity. So that is how.
So you have create, control, compensate.
And transparency.
The final one needed a C, really, didn't it? Could be clarity, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Well, with transparency, so you could just crawl the internet, as some do, and just learn off of it without necessarily communicating what you're going to do with the results afterward. You could do that. We've in the technology industry, that's done a lot. We've been training machine learning models for the last 2 decades plus. That's the only time I've been involved, so I'll only speak to that. But ultimately, the output, how the output is used, is where transparency comes in. Where artists, ultimately the better content is the content that artists are consenting and creating, to be able to enable these learning models to be smart. The more a learning model is trained on on content that isn't quality, the more hallucinations it gets.
Could you explain to the audience what hallucinations are? I don't know whether people are familiar with hallucinations in the context of AI.
Anyone saw some of the funny commentary about how an AI had spoken to a journalist and tried to convince the journalist to leave their partner and be with them instead? That was a hallucination.
So the AI effectively will make things up in some circumstances.
Is that the same as ChatGPT? Because I remember we did a little experiment internally where we said, who invented fan-powered royalties? And ChatGPT was like, Spotify. And we went, isn't it SoundCloud? And it went, yeah. So possibly something like this.
That too. I mean, it depends on what mood it's in.
Sounds just like a really bad friend.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, or a drunk friend. It's hard to tell.
You have to just keep telling it, then it'll learn.
Scary stuff. So I was in Redmond and was speaking to engineers about the way that some of the AIs were learning languages on the fly, learning how to speak a different language. So the transformational power of the technology can be really fascinating. Now, Meng, you've announced recently a form of relationship with Universal Music. Do you want to say a bit more about that and what led to that?
Sorry, you mean the Human Artistry campaign?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think for us, something we care a lot about, exactly, to what Alisha was saying, is the idea that AI can be something that empowers people, and to the point of something like Grimes and what they did with CreateSafe, I think something we feel very strongly about at BandLab, especially in the idea of empowerment of all creators at all stages of their creative process, is the idea of choice. And the idea of pro-creator choice, that Drake should be able to protect his music with UMG, and the way that they look after the protection of training on unlegislated, unlicensed works. But at the same time, Grimes should be totally free to do whatever she wants to do to compete and actually go out there and license her music and create new ways of derivative revenue for her users. So I think that's something that for us, we care a lot about, but ultimately in both sides of this table, it's about humans. And I think, you brought up the really interesting thing about the monkey. And I think this is something where, the big difference between the monkey and the human photographer who owned the camera, is that monkeys don't pay taxes. So obviously,
that's the main difference.
that is one of the differences.
Hopefully there's more.
We could divert this panel to something else, but I think the most important thing is really, when it comes to both sides, it's really about human empowerment and human artistry, whether you're protecting your rights or whether you're deciding to be more liberal with them, and that's something we care a lot about. And so, from a BandLab side, these are some of the challenges and the battles that we are facing on both sides. How do we empower people to bridge that gap between bottom to the top, but also how do we protect people who want to protect their rights? And I think that everyone is on the same page.
We just need to set things up so that we can leverage it the same way that we did when you used to have to carry a huge amp and have a whole staff carry an amp to every show. Now you can press a button or use your laptop and possibly even your phone to be able to present something. That's augmenting human creativity using technology.
Either that or get monkeys to pay taxes. You could do that too.
I thought you were going to say get the monkeys to carry the amp. And
Genius.
It's a new business idea. I'm just putting it out there. Any
I wish
VCs
I'd
in the
never
crowd?
shown the picture of the monkey at this point. I wish I'd never shown it. Now, if that's right, so if we are of the view that AI is empowering, probably I'll ask you this, Hazel, maybe a bit unfair, but if that's right, if it's empowering, but we also probably accept that AI could be used for purposes that are not necessarily in the interests of artists, how do we deal with that? How do we square that away? Is that easy to do? I mean, my sense as someone who's just a lawyer doesn't think that's very easy. What's your sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a catchphrase, AI for good. And I keep dropping it in articles I write and on stage and things like this. And I think that there are ways that AI can just be incredibly powerful. And, for anyone who doesn't think that they're using AI, if you've got a Spotify account and you've been listening to Weekly Discovery, you've been using AI for quite a long time. And there are just certain things that were never legal. Like, it was never legal to scrape the internet for anything you wanted. That always belonged to someone else. I think we just have more awareness now about what we can and can't do. And, generative AI has kind of brought it into popular culture and the lexicon. So I feel like part of my duty, or part of the thing that I'm working on, is just trying to create more AI programs for good, thinking about ways that the technology can be used. One I'm a really big fan of, now me and my co-founder are both at SoundCloud, we started working on a program we call First Fans. Well, what we do is we use AI to analyze every track that's uploaded to the platform through our Next Pro distribution. And then we also analyze the listening profiles of all of our users. And then we try and match the new tracks with 100 fans who would enjoy that track. And we're seeing like a really big spike in listens on new tracks. And that's exciting to me, because one of the challenges has always been, if there's 120,000 songs uploaded every day, what chance have you got of being heard? So I think technology can be really powerful to address challenges like that. We can use it to match up songs with the audience. So that's kind of where I want to put my time and my energy.
Yeah, I'd love to, I think, distribution really isn't the issue for artists today. It's differentiation, right? And that's kind of why we care so much about the ethical use of AI, and why programs like that to match first fans for artists is so important. There are something like, I think the stat in 2022 was a quarter of songs, 38 million songs or something ridiculous, had 0 plays on Spotify in the entirety of the year of 2022. So for an emerging artist, something we care deeply about, especially when you come from emerging platforms or countries and people who only have mobile phone devices, in the US or first world countries like Singapore, we're very lucky where we say, you could use can't you make music for free on GarageBand? But 80% of the world, depending on what stat you use, uses Android. That's billions of people around the world that do not have the ability to express themselves creatively and musically because they don't have the social economic status to afford an iPhone. And so when we think about empowering people and this, this issue with differentiation, I think the biggest challenge for an emerging artist today is not just competing against everyone in their locale or their generation. They're also competing on Spotify with Taylor Swift, with Ed Sheeran. They're competing with the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Beethoven, Bach, not just the best people in their generation today, but all the generations that came before. So I think, when we think of AI for good, but also the reality, as we've seen in other industries like deep fakes and pornography and things like that, that AI can be used for bad. And look, we're going to 2024, so we're going to see a lot of deep fakes that are going to be used for less positive purposes.
Was that a geopolitical reference?
Never talk about politics on stage.
Just checking.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see how this all plays out. But I think AI for good is absolutely, when it's artists first, is really what I think everyone on this stage is all about.
Definitely. I mean, so we recently surveyed our artists and launched an AI in music study. And shared, we survey our artists all the time, asking them questions about a variety of topics. But we wanted to share the results for the first time in our AI and music study globally with others, because we had recognized and learned that 35% of the artists that answered our survey were using AI in their creative process. And that, in terms of what Meng was speaking to, that access to knowing how to pitch yourself, how do you describe your song to the world? How do you get the metadata for your track? There's a lot of things that our independent artists need help with that they're already leveraging AI for. AI for good enables them to, they don't have the ability to hire somebody to manage their PR, hire someone to help them master their tracks, and as an expert and really get it out there and have the sound exactly how they want it. They're leveraging a lot of tools. So AI opens up, removes barriers and opens up doors for artists.
Then your catchphrase is set. Trademarking.
You've all said it now.
You all heard it first.
Yeah.
Hazel coined
Gregor,
AI
if you
for
feel
good.
any need to work it into the next question.
I don't work for free.
I can't afford you, mate. That's my issue.
We'll talk about it later.
Gotta copyright it.
But it's interesting, right? So you're saying, Alisha, that you've got 35% of the artists are using AI. And then you think about the US Copyright Office's guidance about how to register a work. So already you could see that there's an interesting kind of paradigm arising where is there going to be sufficient human involvement when that's not quite certain in the US or indeed in other countries. I wonder how artists are thinking about that, because my personal view is almost certainly that threshold should be very low. But the last thing you want is lawmakers determining what creativity is.
Well, lawmakers could help support and determine how that's communicated and monetized by the public.
I think we'll build it. Would we not build it like we build a pricing model? You go too low, everyone's buying. It's too low. You go too high, no one wants it. So the reality is it's somewhere between point A and B.
But would you, okay, so let's...
Just an idea.
Free market capitalism?
I'm just working. You know me, Meng. I'm the ultimate capitalist.
Live brainstorm.
Just a quick brainstorm, somewhere in the middle. Maybe there'll be some use cases.
Okay. So when Universal is talking about human created works, there has to be a threshold somewhere, and I don't know what the answer is here. But is it more than pressing a couple of buttons? How many creative decisions would you have to make?
It means not monkeys.
Yeah, but then I also throw back to, and this is a pre-AI example, but the gorillas, right, which is obviously Damon Albarn, but it's 4 avatars, it's digital characters, the music was theirs, but it was created by humans. So I think, there have been people playing maybe for 10 years or more with this concept of what is it to be the artist.
Right.
So
it's not a new thing, is it?
I feel like it's more of an extension of this. That's my personal opinion.
Interesting. Okay.
Not the official opinion.
Not the official stance of the corporation I work for.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. All personal
Possibly.
opinions. So given that we've got less than 10 minutes to go, it's such a fascinating topic. I love the positive energy on the panel. Can we open it up to the audience for questions? Anybody got any questions for the panel at all? Okay.
Oh,
Gentlemen,
chap there. Chap there with his hand up.
Can we get him a microphone?
Yeah, coming.
Thanks, Sean.
It's coming over to him.
Hi, thank you. It was said to me once by Julian Assange that artificial intelligence could dwarf the human endeavor. So when we say that we may use AI to develop sounds, rhythms, and then you have some company that invests into developing a piece of technology that produces 10 million different rhythms, as many as can be possibly imagined by a human, and then registers them all. Like, how do we really manage this situation? So that's my question to you. And SoundCloud, like, big thumbs up. I love the work that you do.
We love it.
I love that I can discover unknown artists. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Go on.
Were you going to lawyer it right
I
up?
was going to lawyer it up, but you go first. I'll give the legal stuff.
Well, I was just going to say, and maybe this is probably what you're going to say as well, there was a case, and I'm completely blanking on the dude's name, in the same way that you can brute force every password up to like X million characters, somebody went out and brute forced every single melody using every single combination of chords, and then copyrighted all of them and put them all in the public domain. So I believe that's an interesting use case for, you know, anyone possibly who would be going for a copyright or an infringement on a sound alike. But yeah, Gregor, where's your take?
I think from a legal perspective, it's relatively clear, right? I don't think it's going to be possible, given the way the system looks like it's going to work, that the machine can take over and crush all human creativity, because what the machine would create, if I just pressed the button and spat out 100,000 different songs, if the law then protected those songs and the monetization of them, well, that would be a problem, a policy problem. I think the more interesting part of what you're saying, though, is would that output serve to saturate or prevent human works coming to the fore or surfacing? And that's really what John was talking about earlier, which I thought was fascinating, that there is already a drive among the distribution end of the business to think about this. I don't think anybody's got the kind of silver bullet solution, but people are already thinking about it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with the question of, like, what do we do with copyright, and I think that's one of the areas we need to be extremely protective of, is that people think that, you know, again, we own media companies, and sometimes the story and the narrative of a hero and a villain, or this versus that, sometimes people think that the protection of copyright is stifling of innovation. Again, like we said, AI for good, but there is a lot of AI for bad as well. And I think in terms of the way that we think about protecting copyright, we are protecting humans and cash flows for actual artists and millions of artists around the world. I think people here who work in the music industry, people sometimes think of it as just a couple of companies, but actually the reality is that there is a massive, massive long tail of artists around the world, that music is a very unique industry for which you can pretty much make something for free on your phone with BandLab. You can upload it for free to places like SoundCloud, YouTube, and if you build a following, you can get a check in the mail every month. And if you don't, you can hire a lawyer and sue them for it.
Yeah,
you know, the unique thing about music is very different to other industries, and that's why I think also the thoughtfulness of how policymakers, which I don't envy the position of all the different policymakers, because there is a geopolitical reality to this that is going to be different in many different countries. You have to be very thoughtful, and the big challenge is that this new phase of AI, again, compared to what Hazel was saying, we've all been using AI for a long time. The big difference is that instead of like recognition of image to text, it's now text to image, and the prompt-based, everything has gotten bigger, the models have gotten bigger, but the threats have gotten bigger as well. And so when it comes to these kinds of things, it's not just affecting music, it's affecting every single industry at the same time, compared to when Airbnb came out and we were worried about the rental industry and it was very clear. Or Uber came out and you're looking at ride hailing and how it affect the audio industry. Right now, Gen AI, or this new model, this sort of new expanded model and rise of Gen AI, is affecting every industry at exactly the same time, all around the world at the same time. And this is one of the biggest challenges, and why I think some of the biggest opportunity right now is to be a lawyer.
Well, at least I get to advise about the machine, because the machine can't advise about itself.
Or a startup founder.
Yeah.
For every risk, there's an opportunity. So
For the lawyer.
also for the lawyers.
Lawyers have it big.
Let's move on.
Well, I'd like to add that so I'd love to give an example as a oil painter who taught herself how to code way back when. People still sell paintings. Photographs and print and digital prints did not replace and decimate the entire art industry. In some ways, it provided ways for that industry to scale beyond the people they could physically hand a painting to. And the ways that you can leverage that, it's unfortunately not as great as the music industry, because the music industry definitely has better laws around it. But you are still able to paint and sell like real paintings, and it has a premium for it. It didn't disappear. But then on the tech side, which since we are talking about AI, there actually used to be copyrights by engineers in code in the 90s. And people thought, oh, well, I don't want to have people copy my code. But then when the engineer wants to leave their job, they're going to get sued by the company because they aren't maintaining this code that they supposedly own. And the companies were left with all of this IP that had no one to maintain it. So then the laws needed to be updated to have the content be owned by the company, because the company is who's going to stick with it for the next decades plus, and engineers were free to move on. Some of that mirrors a lot of what's happening in the music industry over the last several decades, where you had all of these, there were a lot of changes with how credits and copyrights are controlled and managed as digital scales. And we still got a lot to do there. But I can tell you one thing, the content that we've seen from people, from people who leverage Grimes' voice to be able to make songs is good. And it's not a lot. It's not a lot, and it's human created. They just leverage some different tools and their own human creativity to make work.
Right, and there's a company just starting in the UK which is allowing artists the ability to license their own voice through AI. So that is that infrastructure is already developing and becoming available.
More revenue opportunities,
right.
More different markets, different tools.
Right. So I think we could talk about this for the rest of the day. So we've got time for one more question. Stephen, did I see your hand up? You may have to just shout, because I don't think we're going to get a microphone.
And then you repeat it, Gregor.
Okay, I'll repeat it. Yeah, go on.
Question from Meng. I was wondering, as someone who kind of owns some really respected and famous music editorial websites and destinations, did you have any thoughts on AI and editorial and journalism?
Interesting.
Can that be helpful or a hindrance? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I think as with all things, again, I think the simple answer to how AI is going to affect anything is a lot, but it's complicated, right? So I think it applies to music. It also applies to editorial. I think AI is one of the things that, could actually empower so many more people. We've already seen a huge shift of mass editorial creation with things like Twitter or Blogspot and Blogger and those kinds of things. And that's one of the biggest challenges for traditional media players. And a lot of them are facing new challenges today as these things go through. Actually, very interestingly, we at the NME just launched back into print a global print magazine in a time where there's so much content. And I think that's, again, these cycles of when there's so much content, to differentiate and make the ability to champion artists in the right way, you need to present it differently. So I think with AI, when it comes to editorial, there are huge opportunities, whether it's sub-editing, whether it's actually helping people research interviews better so that when they ask someone questions, they can have more research done. There are a lot of ways can be helpful, but at the same time, of course, sub-editing or summarization and certain things could be things that create inefficiencies or replace some jobs in the middle.
Oh, okay. All right, well, look, unfortunately, we're out of time. I really want to say thank you to Hazel, to Meng, and Alisha for having such a lively and great panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gregor.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you to you, Gregor, as well, my friend.